Okay, you're now live.
This is Senate Appropriations Committee, and we are taking testimony from the chair of the House Appropriations Committee, Representative Hooper, who will give us kind of the highlights of the budget adjustment, and then we're going to start our walkthrough and our markup of the bill. I will let Representative Hooper know that obviously last minute more things are coming in, and can we take care of it in the budget adjustment? So it's always right down to the wire, but we appreciate your coming in this afternoon and talking some of the changes. You made some significant changes around workforce, for example. I think you added some money in a variety of places, and it'd just be helpful for us to have the benefit of the work that your committee did.
Terrific. Well, thank you. And senators, I wonder if you can tell where I am. You should recognize that I am sitting in the witness chair in your committee room, and I noticed that it is significantly lower than all of the other chairs. You've also left me in here long enough that I have been studying your chandelier, and I have never looked at it, and I need somebody to interpret it for me. So it's an awfully nice room, and I look forward to you all being back in it. So to the budget adjustment, as is usually the case, we agreed with most of the governor's proposals. I think, as is not surprising, since it's really normally just a mid-year tune-up, and who would know how to tune up the machine better than the person who's running it. One of the more significant things that we have done is just to change some funding sources on a number of the appropriations. Our general philosophy is to try to preserve and protect the most flexible dollars there are, which are general fund dollars. And so where appropriate, we were spending ARPA funds. One of the things that I've been thinking about is just a concern about our ability to wisely spend ARPA money in the time frame we have. Clearly, it's not the horrible sprint that we had with the CRF, but I think we're going to find that 2.5 years is not a lot of time, particularly given workforce and supply chain related issues of just getting that money out the door. So we've moved some of the governor's proposals off of general fund back onto ARPA, and you'll see that kind of sprinkled throughout the budget. One of the other, I think, terribly significant things that we did was one to add an additional $50 million for the pension conversation. You know that 150 was set aside, and part of the agreement was to move it up to 200. So we have established a fund for the additional 50. The governor's proposal had a series of deficit reduction proposals, and I think that the agreement worked out by the pension task force for the investment of $200 million plus some significant contributions by the employee groups that buys us $2 billion off of our unfunded liability is a pretty fabulous deal, and big applause to the folks who helped make that happen. And the chair of your committee played such a significant role in that. That's in section 52, and right after it in section 53, we also created a temporary reserve of $85 million, knowing that for the federal infrastructure bill. I'm trying to remember what IIJA stands for, infrastructure and investment. No, I can't do it.
Jobs and jobs.
Infrastructure. I can't remember what the other I is, in Jobs Act. Yeah. Infrastructure and investment, something, Jobs Act. So we set aside $85 million, knowing that that was going to require significant matching money to get it out the door. And we just wanted to make sure that we had enough money ready to do that work. So that's set aside. We did a little bit on the property management fund deficit and the liability self-insurance. We paid off the TIB bond, so that will free up some money in the transportation arena. We did not do the repayment of, the governor proposed $20 million on repaying some bonds in the capital program. And I think it's a really interesting idea, but the challenge there is assuring that we don't pay down those bonds and then go out tomorrow and bond again. And so we're going to need to think about how to do that. You may recall that when we did employee buyouts about 10 years ago, when we were trying to save some money, we said, we're not going to hire more employees. We're really going to stick to this plan of having a leaner workforce. And about 2 seconds later, we hired more employees. And that's my same concern with the bond buy down program. The pay-as-you-go proposal, which is something the state treasurer has been working on for about 10 years, is a great idea. I just don't know how we're going to kind of have the rigor that we need to address that. So I think that's an ongoing conversation between us. The big thing that I'm proud of is that we took the governor's proposal for doing some investment in some of the community based programs, and we really beefed it up. We took as a model what he was doing for the Vets Home, the Vermont Psychiatric Care, and the Department of Corrections with their retention and shift differentials, that the bonuses that they were trying to provide there. And we said, sounds like a generally good idea. Shouldn't we do the same thing for all of those folks in the community who have received virtually no support, no additional funding and recognition of really pretty heroic work that they have done over these past 2 years. And let's see, that's in section 72. And you'll see that we put it, it's a total of about $60 million that would go to assisted living providers, nursing homes, home health, the designated and specialized agencies, recovery centers, and that's not an inclusive list, but as I said, some of the frontline workers, it's about $3,000 per worker, and we intentionally left broad discretionary language to the employers, knowing that they would have the best idea on how to reward their employees. So I as I said, I'm feeling good about that. I think that was a good investment. Another significant area is you heard that the Vermont State College scholarship program was oversubscribed very quickly. And they had conversations with the Joint Fiscal Committee, kind of wondering how to attend to this. And we said we'd look at it in the BAA. So we backfilled what they offered to their students. And then we added some additional money, trying to get ahead of the cycle of how loans and scholarships are made available to students. And so we've added an additional semester of funding for the state colleges so that when they do their loan packages for students, they'll have a complete ability to offer a package.
Okay, I think Senator Bruce put his hand up. One of the things that we got from the state colleges is they wanted 10 million of funding.
Yeah.
That was in the BAA. I just want to confirm what you're talking, and they used that argument about needing to have it, for because of the timing.
We did 9.7.
Okay, so I just wanted to link that request with what you just said. It's to you, so you were accepting that request.
I didn't think of it that way. I had my own rationale, but the numbers are similar.
Okay. All right, Senator Bruce.
Could I ask Representative Hooper, as I remember when they came to us, they wanted more money for the oversubscribed existing program, and they wanted to start a new program in the BAA, which struck me as a little odd. Is all the money you just described for the existing scholarship program or a new one?
We did not add additional groups who could be eligible. So we did not change the eligibility requirements, unless Stephanie tells me I'm remembering wrong.
No, you did the second year of the existing program, not the expansion of the program that the state colleges had envisioned. That's what the 7.3. The 7.3 that the House did is analogous to the 10 that the state college asked for. But
okay, I think if I understand what you're saying, then it's getting ahead of the cycle for the program that we already have in place. That seems fine to me. But they were, as I remember, they were coming forward with a brand new scholarship program, which seemed like it should wait for the budget.
They were calling it Critical Occupations 2, which was basically Critical Occupations 1 plus some additional
occupations. Yeah.
And that's what's not included in the 7.3 from the House.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay.
In that arena, we also added $1 million for the University of Vermont to replicate the workforce training program that they had also done, and which was, I gather, spent within 24 hours of that, being available last year. We did not do the governor's request of $1.5 million from the Ed Fund spread across the 17 CTEs, community and technical education centers. I don't think had an opinion on whether or not that was a good idea, but we did have an opinion that we wanted to have more information than the way it was proposed. What we did do was for the 3 private CTEs which did not have an opportunity to receive any funding, they had a rather detailed, comprehensive analysis of what their needs were. And we provided funding for that on the order of about $500,000 for those 3 CTEs. We had language of saying, hey, AO, Agency of Education, bring us back more information, give us some information on why we should be funding the CTEs, and we'll certainly consider it. We just didn't have the sort of information that's appropriate for making that sort of decision. And then we as you know, the governor had a pretty significant and important housing request, additional funding. He proposed $50 million in ARPA for VHCB. And here's an instance where we weren't as eager to spend ARPA money. We split that and said $25 million in ARPA and $30 million in general fund dollars. And the reason for that is the general fund, ARPA cannot be used to draw down the federal tax credit, housing tax credit money, whereas general fund can. That's about a 30% differential. So by providing 30 million in general fund dollars, the rough math is that creates about another $9 million of housing spending available. So we offered VHCB 55 million with the split I've just described. The VHIP program we accepted as proposed by the governor. There are kind of two areas where if we'd had more time, we would have spent more time and been more thoughtful in developing proposals. VHIP is one. I think on it there are some questions, and I think probably there should be some parameters around how that funding is made available to the private sector. And so I think some additional work could be done there, but we left the proposal as was, which, as you know, is a plus up from what they did earlier, what we did last year. On the proposal to provide $5 million to the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, excuse me, this is another case of we just didn't have sufficient information to be comfortable with this program, particularly because it is a new program. It was still very much in the conceptual stage. The thought was to provide, I think it was about $35,000, maybe to the homeowner or maybe to the developer, so that the cost of construction for kind of that more middle income sort of housing would be reduced. I personally need a lot more information before I'm comfortable with a $5 million appropriation. So we zeroed that out and look forward to figuring it out. Without a doubt, we have to figure out how to increase housing in that kind of middle income range. And there are a host of ideas for how to do that. And I think our challenge is to figure out how to be smart and make it happen as rapidly as possible. We also, just because of the shortness of time, did not feel, we worked on, we added some language around the Department of Children and Families housing, the program that houses people who are unhoused, so the hotel program, the motel program. We added language that said it would continue at least through the year. We were having a debate as to statutory changes that may or may not be required, a concern about not creating additional rights or taking away rights, and that needs some work. And I'd like to think that we give you a very nice, complete, perfect package that you shouldn't touch at all, but I will readily admit that needs some work. And then finally, we just did, there were a handful of other requests that we heard through our public hearing process and also through written testimony that was submitted. Working Lands program was significantly oversubscribed, and certainly when you're looking for ways to help pull people out and to, reestablish our economy as we come out of the pandemic, I think investments in working lands are huge and important. We heard that the municipal grants program that's run by the Agency of Commerce and Community Development was also deeply oversubscribed, given that those are planning grants that are given to municipalities that frequently look at how do you change your zoning. And one of the presses is how do you change your zoning so you can develop more housing. We thought that was a good place to add little bit, that's, $250,000. And you'll see there are kind of a host of other initiatives that are all important. By not mentioning them, I'm not saying they're not important, but I just wanted to pull out a handful. And I've talked for a long time, so I'm going to stop.
Okay, well, appreciate your sharing your thinking of why some proposals were not included and which ones need a little bit more attention. I do know Commissioner Brown has got his work group, and I think they may be able to come up with something that is satisfying. One of the things I've said right along is taking that federal emergency rental assistance and trying to cram it into a pre-existing GA program it really should stand by its own with its own rules, et cetera, rather than wrenching another program. So we'll see what they come up with, but I know the issue was around availability of what would be motel housing and the tenancy issue. So hopefully they can come up to some accommodation, or ultimately we'll have to deal with the language issue that is still out there. So other questions of the representative Hooper from Appropriations, who's not only has she come, but she even came to our committee room to present as though we were all there in person. If not, then we're going to just grind through the bill as you passed it. And there'll be probably some changes, some things that we've thought about. I mentioned a couple to you already. And we'll see. Our goal is to see if we can get it pretty well wrapped up by Friday and voted out early next week.
Wow.
May be ambitious, but it's better to try to get things moving, and so we can get started on the big bill.
Yeah. Well, that's exciting. I'm impressed. So
Well,
we look forward to working with you on this. So thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for stopping by.
Okay.
And keeping our witness chair warm.
Yeah. Thank you. It's nice to see you all. I miss seeing you in person. So thank you. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye. So Stephanie, do you, we have not gone through the language. And so my question is, should we, how you want to organize this on terms of just going through and closing out sections? And
I thought that would be the approach today, is to just start with the language part of the bill, which is section 46. And you'll have to let me know, do you want it up on the screen, or does everyone have what Chrissy sent out, which is the color-coded document that will show, what the House struck, what the House added, with the explanations that originally came from the governor.
All right, so you're talking about the annotated?
The annotated. And it probably says on top, draft number 220441, 113/2022, just before 6 p.m. on the 13th of January, in the very top left-hand corner. So if folks have that document up on a device that works for them, then we will leave everyone up and not share the language on the screen.
Also, really quick, I did send everybody a package. Did everyone get their package from me? Because there's a hard copy in all your packets.
Oh, no, that's over in my other house.
Sorry.
I'm just going to go grab it. It's downstairs.
Okay, great. Yeah, so you'll have a printed out version for you to follow along if that's more helpful.
I'm going to go get mine then.
Okay,
But
great.
Alice, you're still consigned to your iPhone, right?
Have the paper ones.
Yeah, I sent it to
Oh, you-
Alice too. Yeah, Senator Nick I also received.
Jane, is there anyone that could bring it over from your house?
I don't know. Let
What's
me
at the-
see.
Do you have two devices there that you can pull it up on one?
What's at the top of the page?
I can't get it to open. I've got two devices, but I can't get it to open.
Do you want me to just send you a PDF of it on to your email to see if that helps?
Yes, if you would, thank you.
I will do that right
Oh, no,
now.
my battery's low.
Uh-oh.
No, on my phone.
Okay.
Stephanie,
Yeah.
is it the one? I have one that says it has no number on it. It's just X's.
Yep, it's like line one says number XX.
Yeah.
And just above that, it says, red is hack amendments, black is governor's recommend.
No,
It's this.
Yes, we received that one.
this.
No, there should be another one. That was as it came over from the governor, and then there's one that has red on it.
It has
this
a,
one.
a January 13th date in the top left-hand corner. It's sort of very light gray.
Oh, yeah. That one.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Oh, great.
This one.
And for Senator
Correct.
Kitchell, the PDF should have shown up on her, should be momentarily showing up on her email, I think.
It is, but I'm now running into problems. Oh, yes, it's showing up, and now I've lost my Zoom.
No, you're here, you're with us, we see you.
No, I've lost my video. All right, so I can't, it's no
you-
different than if you put it up on the screen.
Oh, you
I
can't
see.
see.
I've got
Oh.
two monitors here, and so what's happened is the device that has the Zoom software now is showing the document that I opened up on the other screen. And
So there must be a way to shrink the document on one of yours. In actually, the Zoom is probably
All right.
behind there somewhere. If you can,
I don't know. Oh,
you
just
can
a
bring it
minute.
forward so you could see us all.
Hmm? I don't know. Just a second. All right. Now I've lost my document. I've got you.
And you can't get the Zoom on one. It sounds like you're having the same things on both screens.
No, I've got my email over, but when I go to open up the document, it comes over onto the
Oh,
onto my laptop here. So I don't know what to do about that.
you don't have a printer set up there yet.
I don't.
Would it make sense now just to share screen instead?
I'm beginning to think so. If you would, please.
Stephanie, do you want to share or would you like me to do it?
I will share it. I
Okay,
have
great.
it open on mine.
Terrific.
So let me, this is the one. And I guess we would just start from the beginning, and please interrupt me because you're now small on the side of the, is it up for people? Are people seeing it?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So there are all the B sections of the bill ahead of this that are the number changes, and those reflect mostly what you've been taking testimony in terms of the number changes from the governor. There were just a handful of sections that the House changed in those B sections, and we'll revisit those a little bit later. But most of the things that Representative Hooper talked about, we're going to come across as we go through the language, starting in section 46.
Okay.
And so section 46, sub A here, this is amending last year's one-time section. These are updates to the numbers of dollars amounts coming out of being spent for the 53rd week in Medicaid and the 27th pay period. So there's just refinements to the numbers. You'll see in another section of the bill that the amount that is going into the reserve and coming out of the reserve is also being adjusted to fully reflect this $39.46 million. But this is just the most trued up numbers for those two events that are happening simultaneously by the end of this fiscal year.
Oh, it's a really true budget adjustment.
Yeah. On line 11, number 12, this is not a change in dollars. This is simply a change in where the 211 call center dollars should go to DCF as opposed to the secretary's office, because they're the managers of the contract. So that's just basically a technical correction.
Okay, and committee, I'm just closing these out unless it seems like they're pretty much technical. So Stephanie and Chrissy, so that we can just try to distill what it is. Yeah. So we're closing that out. We'll move on to.
So this one might remain open for a bit. This is number 20, line 13, and it stretches onto the next page. The governor did propose the 25 million of general fund it's basically the stabilization pot for healthcare. But it's sub A, the House agreed with the 25 million. The change that the House did was here, carving out 5.28 million of that specifically for nursing homes to be done through rates to nursing homes outside of the regular rate setting process, essentially. And so we have not gotten the letters from the administration yet. My understanding from Adam, they'll probably come at the end of the day today or tomorrow morning, first thing.
Okay.
But I do know that this is one that I think we will see in their letters as a concern, the carve out piece of this.
All right, so we'll hold that, obviously.
Line number 6, the struck through 15 million. The governor had proposed 15 million of general fund to the agency for healthcare workforce retention initiatives or incentives, but these would be different than a different group of providers than what is contemplated under the home and community-based service plan. And so this is one where the House, did their $60 million retention proposal from 3 different funding sources, and not this proposal from the administration.
So let me ask, there's 60 million. Does it include the nursing home assistance for traveling nurses? Is that in or out? Is that included in their 60 million total, or is it added?
So the retention payments for nurses who are employees of, so the $60 million is open to a list of providers, and nursing homes are in that list of providers.
Okay.
And the way they contemplate it is, a provider would come and say, I have a retention plan for my employees based on FTEs. They would get a grant and implement their retention plan. I believe up in the $25 million stabilization pot, I don't know if the carve out for the 12 million through rates for nursing homes would address that, particularly for the traveling nurses that nursing homes hire, or through another, if this wasn't there, they could go to the $25 million pot and seek stabilization funding there as well.
So can I just, can I ask Stephanie?
Yes, you may.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because it's a little confusing, because it says we match 5.2 million to match the 12 million in global commitment, and then it's 12 million for nursing home reimbursement for traveling nurses costs. So so
the traveling nurses are up here in the stabilization. They're not in the retention.
Okay.
So the traveling nurses are contracts. They're not employees.
Yep. Okay.
And so the $25 million pot, it takes 5.2 of it and turns it into $12 million of global commitment fund, and says we will push that out to nursing homes to cover traveling nurses.
Okay, so that's separate. The only thing I would say to the committee is we're trying to get some additional information. So we're not going to close out any of this, because they're in terms of what can be matched and so forth we're still seeking clarification, but it's helpful to see what they're doing here. But the only thing I'm saying is we're going to get more information, hopefully, to help us understand all this. What, Philip?
It was
No, it
me.
was Dick.
Oh, what'd you say, Dick?
As part of that information, as you might guess, I heard from the home health agencies that they had traveling nurses as well, and that they're in a deficit on what they actually spent versus what was appropriated. And I can
Okay.
get a copy of that to Stephanie, but I don't know if that's included in here or somewhere else, or if it didn't even make the cut.
Well, I think with the nursing homes, because they're rate setted, they're, I don't know, then they do have extraordinary relief. But yes, it begs a larger question about who else is having to pay for traveling nurses. We're gonna obviously have some more discussion on that.
Well, I'll
Or-
try to find that email and send it to both of you.
Yeah, okay. All right. So let's keep going. So
Okay.
they did
So
something
we're-
for nursing homes, for traveling nurses. And
Yeah.
then we're going on to,
So I'm on line 8 on page 2 now. This is you heard from Secretary Quinn on the digital service component pieces for cybersecurity, the 3.3.
yeah,
There was no change in the House on that piece. Number 24 at the top of page 3, and tell me if my scrolling,
well, committee, I think we're in agreement. Cybersecurity is very serious. And this is something that I believe felt
Do it.
was justifiable. Okay, so we're going to close that out.
top of page 3, this is where the governor had proposed $20 million to redeem, bonds, pay down bonds. And the House has not done that in the budget adjustment bill.
Okay.
And Stephanie, is that part of the 50 million that they created the fund to reach the 200 million for the pension?
You could consider it part of that.
It
It's
could
not,
be, it could be.
Okay,
they didn't use the entirety of the general fund available, but it was probably part of their capacity thinking.
okay, good.
Mhm. So do we want to keep that, do we want to close that out, I guess is what I'm saying. It's not to pay those now. We were thinking of a different end of the year surplus construct that might deal with some of these payments. So it's something that, even though it's not here, doesn't mean that we won't come back and revisit it possibly
In a different way.
in a different
potentially.
way. And the reason that I'll just to refresh people's memory, the current methodology for any surplus at the end of the year is split 50% into the rainy day fund, but the rainy day fund is full. It's at, it's at the maximum percentage. We're changing it in the pension agreement that the other 50%, rather than going to state employees, OPEB or healthcare, because now we're getting into a pre-funding mechanism and have dealt with that 50% would then be dedicated to the pension underfunding, split equally between teachers and state employees. So since the 50% for rainy day, we're already at the statutory maximum. What we can consider when we're doing the big bill is taking some of these one-time payoffs of obligation and use that 50% that's unneeded for rainy day to go toward payment of the general obligation bonds. So just thinking ahead, that even if we don't do it here, doesn't mean that we wouldn't, consider addressing it just in a different way. And with the benefit of more information than paying it off right now. And the governor was arguing that that this would help when they went to the bond market in April. But if we can get the pension bill through and that 50 million is part of it, if we're reducing the underfunded liability by 2 billion, that's when we said we thought maybe that would even be more persuasive to the market. So that's just some background in terms of that particular proposal. And so unless people want to keep it open, or do we want to, knowing that we're going to revisit it, close it out in terms of the BAA? Yes, Phil.
I would be for closing it out, but I guess the one thing I think is it's hard to know how wed to that 20 million closeout the administration is. Is that something that could, you know, be a glitch in the governor accepting the pension, or a glitch in signing this? Do we know from?
We don't know. So we can
Okay.
just keep it open for the time being.
And you might get a read on that when you get the letters that normally come.
Yeah. I haven't gotten the Dear Jane letter yet. It's supposed to come this afternoon.
Oh,
All right, so why don't we just leave that open pending receipt of the letter?
Lines 5 through 8, this is the $350,000 for the Green River Dam.
Okay.
I'm assuming that one's going to stay closed.
Yes, but I think we need to make it clear that the purpose for that is to help answer that question about the cost if the state were to assume ownership of this resource, which based on testimony has significant value in the form of the campground and the recreational asset that that the reservoir generates. So I think everybody felt that that was good idea to preserve that resource and to explore, not just, and that we needed to, if we're going to acquire the ownership, we needed to go in with our eyes open in terms of what it would cost to do whatever was necessary to shore up the dam. So everybody okay on keeping that? Okay, we'll move on.
And on line 9, this is the $33,000 you heard from Dan Dickerson in our office regarding expense for the health consultant to the HROC. On line 11 through 13, the House added $350,000 to the Agency of Ed for the adult ed and literacy programs related to COVID shortfalls.
I think that must have been a request that they got in their public hearing.
I will find out if they have any documentation in their folders for it. And
yeah, that would be very helpful.
Sent out to folks. And I think we got the similar request on number 26, line 14.
We absolutely did. And we had, yes, to keep that going until we can figure out how to fund the public access.
And in number 27, I don't know if we've seen that. I don't know if I've seen that same request come through, but it's the statewide syringe services for
I did not receive anything. And Rich, is that anything you've got any?
I haven't heard anybody talk about that.
Okay.
We'll find out what was submitted at the public hearing for that one.
Yes, that would be helpful.
Okay.
I'm obviously considering the severity of our, our opioid crisis and our drug problem. I don't really have, any reason to doubt it, but it would be nice if we could at least have the background information in terms of the request. But in terms of the money, if it's needed, people on the syringe exchange, okay with that?
Yeah.
All right. Oh, here's the 250 to help with the planning. Do we need to make it more specific in terms of what that municipal planning, because Representative Hooper was talking about the planning necessary to promote smart growth, et cetera. So was there an effort to guide, or because I think, didn't we have, it seems like in the bill last year, the housing bill, there was money to municipal planning, but it was to help update zoning bylaws and whatever.
There was some money there. I'll check and see if we want to mirror the same language here, if you're going to keep this appropriation in the bill.
All right, but was that appropriation in the bill that got vetoed?
Oh, it might have been. Okay.
I don't know.
79, yeah.
Yeah.
But
All right, I'll make a note of that.
Okay.
Okay.
Dave.
Because I need to have some follow-up discussion with Senator Sirotkin about some of this housing stuff. So I'll talk to him about, because I do remember they had, they recognized that there needed to be some updates to zoning and so forth. Okay.
But I haven't had one call on that from any of the towns up here, including Newport.
Well, we'll see what the House had for a request as well. And then number 29, we already took testimony on that, and I think that was part of the request from.
Yeah, this is the one piece of it that's an appropriation. The other two you'll see in the transfers.
Yeah, so I think we'll close that out. Number 29,
Yep.
Senator Sears, you all right on that?
Yep.
Okay.
So what looks like section 3 that's struck here, this has to do with the home and community-based service plan that is about $150 million, the 140 something million dollars. The ARPA bill had the 10% increase in home and community-based service FMAP for a year, and it restricted how you could use that savings to reinvest in the home and community-based service universe of providers. This language, we instructed the House to strike it for the time being. Sarah, myself, and the folks at AHS are in conversation about the best way to draft this. We need to sort of cordon off the money so that it's accounted for very distinctly under the reporting requirements. But we also want to, as you might see in subsection B, they wanted to appropriate the full amount and just have the amounts carry forward. And I was concerned about whether or not doing the full amount of appropriation for the plan sort of precluded you from going in and potentially, putting your stamp on pieces of it, much like the House did by pulling out the 18 million, which is a subset of the struck 85 million you see here for their retention plan. And so this was one that I think your staff will revisit and propose some alternative language. We just weren't able to do that in the time frame of the House.
Okay, so the House just struck the language, knowing
struck
that
the language at our recommendation for the time being.
Okay, all right. So you're coming back with some replacement language.
We've been having conversations with the like Rich Donahue and the fiscal folks at the agency. So how do we craft this that it works administratively, but also reserves your ability to influence the plan as we go through this process and the budget process for 23.
Okay, all right. I don't think anybody will object with that. It's just we'll have to approve the replacement language when it comes in.
And if we don't get to it by the time the BAA is done, there's always the opportunity in the big bill to do it effective on passage. But I know the agency would like to have it, at court, done sooner if it can be. Section 47, line 4 here. This is the portion of the pension deal where the language is coming in because this bill is expected to pass much sooner. That directs the treasurer to look at the creating the new group.
Okay.
And coming back by April 15th.
Yeah, it's pretty time sensitive.
Yeah.
April 15th. So this is.
That's what you see here is that directive to look at that and work with the actuaries.
Okay.
So I'm assuming you want to leave this as is in the bill.
I think so. I think because we want to obviously it's happening right now, but I think we probably want to formalize it, and this is the best,
Place to do it.
best place.
So section 48, this is getting into what's called the D101 section that's in the bill every year. This is the fund transfers, the reversions and transfers to reserves always happen in this sort of complicated list of numbers section of the bill. And we always end up amending parts of it as the year goes through. And so the first amendment is here on lines 3 through 5. This is an update to the water quality money that's going over to ag. And we heard from Julie Moore and Emily Byrne a few weeks ago, one component piece of this. So this was, they had additional funds in the Clean Water Fund. We have both the portion that's the meals and rooms tax and the property transfer tax, that surcharge that goes into that fund.
Okay, so that's just
That's just an update to what's available to send over to ag.
yeah, okay. People all right? Close that out. Senator Starr?
Yes.
I guess it's giving ag more money because more revenues were available.
Yep.
All right, we'll close that out.
And then numbers 9, 10, and 11 go together. These are the component pieces of the funding to pay down the TIB bonds to redeem those sooner.
Mhm. And that would
And
save
so the-
about 2.5 million on debt service that could be available to help match those new additional federal dollars.
We don't know. The House, the governor had proposed to transfer money into the correctional industries internal service fund, which has a deficit. The House did not do that in the budget adjustment. And I'm actually drawing a blank as to why. I think it is a structural deficit, and I think they were holding that for the conversation, the big bill, to understand. This is a one-time fix for 1 year. Do we address the whole thing in a different way in the big bill conversation?
Well, this would deal with it for, well, and this is an internal service deficit. So has this been, this is more than a 1 year? This is an accumulated.
I think it's been a growing deficit over several years. And so the proposal from the governor was to at least, balance the fund for 22.
And the House struck it.
And the House is not doing that here.
Okay. Is this time sensitive?
Well, we would just be carrying that if we close 22 with a deficit in the fund, we close 22 with a deficit in the internal service fund. It's carried on the treasury.
No, I was thinking, can we do it in the big bill?
Oh, you can do it in the big bill. In fact, the structural solution is probably something that needs to be addressed, at some point. Understanding how much of the deficit is growing, year to year, and what the options are, if any, besides general fund, stopgap.
Okay. That million's probably part of that. What did they have? 87 million in reserve.
85. We'll come to that in a short bit.
Why don't we hold that for a little bit, then we can come
So
back.
that one you may want to,
I mean, I think we're trying to figure out, this is just another of that list of, and certainly we talked about it with crime victims, where we've got ongoing disparity between costs and revenues to support the activity or the benefit or services. So we ought to keep a list of, and is this a year to try to, how many can we deal with as well? We'll
leave that one open as a,
okay.
we'll revisit that
Senator
one.
Steers, I'm gonna, correctional industries. is that something, I don't know what it's going to look like in 23. I don't even know what correctional industries, they used to do a lot of the furniture for the state. I'm not even sure how well that, how big that program is. I don't know what the total cost is versus the deficit. Is that something that maybe we could get more? I would like to get a better understanding of, correctional industries in today's context of what we have for budget needs.
Yeah, I don't.
So maybe we can, we'll just put that on. They took it out. I'm going to just hold it, but I'm inclined to think it's part of a larger discussion. It's something we could do in 23 to get maybe the fund. So we're not carrying a deficit, but I think it begs the larger discussion around, the whole correctional industry program and how the world has changed from a number of years ago. I don't know exactly what products are, they're selling, what the market is.
Mainly
What?
things of that nature.
So maybe we should just set
And
that.
many of the facilities don't have anything. That's the other problem.
Newport.
Like Springfield has
has-
nothing.
Newport has a pretty active place. I know that.
Well, what are they producing there, Bobby?
Some furniture, a lot of signs, and they have a designated worker that trucks that stuff around all over the state. And why I know that is because he lives here in Troy, and I visit with him once in a while, and he said they're pretty busy out there.
Apparently, not all programs are busy. Let's just set that aside. I think it's part of a larger
get more.
discussion for now. Okay.
Okay. In lines 3 and 4, number 12, the governor had proposed, the administration had proposed this $10 million offset to the property management fund for the piece that is not as well covered in the plan. The House decided to do 5 million of that.
What is the deficit?
Well, it's off the top of my head, I can't remember what it is. It's in the CAFR every year. And it's been declining. It was an overall 50-year plan. I think it's 20 some odd years left on it, 20-ish years left on it. We can get you the details. There's a memo that we can provide, that we can get from the administration on it.
Okay.
And I know this is, I think this is the higher priority first, and then the callable bonds piece, if you were going to stack those up sort of in priority. I think the property management piece from finance and management's point of view would be the best thing to clean up.
Okay, all right. So the question is, do we want to go with the 5 and then, well, you can always do more later.
Yeah. Or if the construct, we could when we revisit the construct.
Yeah.
On the
this
callable
would
bond,
be one of the elements in this.
we could do the second part of this there or something
Uh-huh.
like that.
Okay. Yeah.
This is the the self-insurance fund. You heard from Hardy Merrill on this, I believe. And part of it's due to the increase in cybersecurity because we self-insure and the coverage that we need. I don't know what the differential was that the House had on the $1.7 million. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on that.
All right. Well, maybe we need an explanation.
Yeah. Of
why
why
they
why they
reduced.
felt that only the cybersecurity piece needed to be covered as opposed to the other pieces of.
Okay, we'll hold that open pending more information.
The next two, bottom of this page 7 and top of page 8, these are the other transfers that we heard about in 1.3 in the Crime Victim Special Fund and 250 in the Domestic and Sexual Violence Special Fund.
We'll close that out.
Okay. On line 6, this is actually money coming into the general fund. It's the leftover. When we closed down the Vermont Life program, we had made provisions so that we could orderly close that down and had transferred money into the enterprise fund. And this is left over now that that is completely shut. So it's just sweeping back into the general fund on line 6.
Okay, so we, that's totally, and the deficit's been paid off.
Yeah.
How
So that
soon-
was painful, wasn't it?
Yep.
That was,
Senator Westman,
that was awful.
yeah. Okay, well, that's good. We'll take it. This is another reversion military.
Yeah, this is so
Oh.
quite, we don't have the uptake on the military scholarships as I believe. Oh no, this is administration. So, oh no, this is the scholarship piece.
All right. In reading the report, and I sent you a note, Stephanie,
Okay.
there had been a comment that if we made some modifications to the assistance, there was money to support it. Do you remember that? Oh,
Is this the?
it was from the BSAC, I think, report that I
Okay.
read, and I copied the last paragraph to you and sent it.
I will find that. I'm sorry,
Um,
I'm not. It's not clicking immediately for me. I'm sorry.
It's not clicking? Okay.
Nope.
Like I don't,
What
like,
you're
it's
saying
not
is
like I
if
don't send you
if we
very
made
much
changes
stuff.
to the National Guard Scholarship Program, we might be able to deploy the dollars more deeply or something to that effect.
Mhm.
I was reading a report and I think I sent it to you. Well, I don't know.
We'll follow up on it.
You want me to check on, get you that report?
Well, I read it, and there was, at the very end, there was a comment about there would be additional funding to make a change that they thought would be beneficial. And so that's what
That's-
happens when I'm reading a report at night. And I've been reading a lot of reports, as people will know. Okay. We'll keep going because obviously,
But we'll have a note on that one.
yeah, I'll see if I can find my email to you.
Line 10, what you see in the change here, this is the reversion of legislative carry forward. So the increase from 140 to 435, that was part of the budget build, understanding where the carry forward was, and that was what was in the governor's recommend. The $1.5 million increase that you're seeing in the House's number, this has to do with the State House expansion planning. And I don't know if I believe the Senate Institutions Committee is hearing about that, so you might want to get their input from, I don't know, unless this committee wants to go forward as it is proposed. The idea here is that the 1.5 will revert out of the legislature's budget and would be available to be appropriated to BGS. because you'll see later in the bill, they would be handling the planning of the State House expansion.
Okay. Who does the capital bill now in budget, in JFO?
Dan Dickerson.
Oh, could Dan check on that?
So I believe he mentioned in staff meeting yesterday.
Oh, no, I meant in terms of whether Senator Benning has taken any testimony, you know.
I believe they have started, and I believe he indicated that they might not be as receptive to this idea as the House was.
I see. Okay. All right, so I'll have to check with, let me send a note to Joe. I know that I've heard some senators say that they don't support this initiative. So, all right, we'll.
Yeah, and I know in the House, the question of who would actually, manage the planning and the contract between, the legislative branch and BGS was also they landed on BGS doing it, but I think there was a lot of discussion around that. We're on page 9 and scrolling through. Most of these are as they were proposed by the governor. The new ones that are underlined are reversions that are new. There's a $50,000 reversion from the Secretary of Administration, $117,000 reversion from budget management. It's a pretty long list. Renter rebate is the largest one at $1.7 million.
Mm-hmm.
Most of these, I believe, we know most of these are due to the pandemic funding and the rollout of, with CRF money and assistance programs in the, so you don't double dip on the renter if you were getting, other rental assistance.
Right.
And so that's this list adds up to about a little over $30 million. The one that is not being reverted is the $65,000 in the treasurer's budget, because that's going to be the continue actuarial work like on the group F. And
That's good. I was wondering whether we were going to remove that from a reversion. So that's been taken care of.
Yeah, and like so this is a very long list, and that was the only change that was made in the House was that treasurer's piece for the actuarial work.
Okay.
And these are all reversions?
They're all reversions. They're all general fund dollars that were appropriated in the past and were not used in previous fiscal years. Yep. And they're proposed for reversion here. The reason they weren't used in 20 and 21 is because of the flood of other federal money that has come in.
Oh.
So the reversion doesn't impact the base position of any agency. It's simply and
it has no negative impact. We're not removing funding that is needed to support the work. It's just what's been it's over appropriated.
Yep.
And then there are a list of reversions in the Ed Fund as well. And these are all incorporated into, I believe, the Ed Fund balance sheet for December 1 already. On bottom of page 11 and on top of page 12. And there's also a reversion against the JTOC amount in state police in 22. And you saw there was a $16 million reversion or $13 million reversion in general fund. A lot of CRF money was usable by state police and FEMA money. So that's the reason for that.
And this money is going toward that package toward paying off our TIB bonds. Okay, let's close that out.
Yep. Line 9 through 11. This is also one of the pieces that the A&R folk mentioned. This is not the ag piece, but the Office of Water Programs additional what funding that wasn't used in previous years is reverting, staying in the Clean Water Fund, and as part of the balance of monies that are available to go to other places for water programs. Section 49 This is the 2753 reserve transfer in 22. You see in sub A, the dollar amounts being adjusted upward of how much is being reserved into the fund in 22. And at the same time in sub B, the dollar amount being unreserved to pay for the general fund appropriation, which was the first item of this language section. So this transaction, it takes 3 transactions to update this reserve, and because it's the year we're paying it out, the appropriation. Section 50. These are the commissioner authorized. So this is simply an extension of the date down on line 17. It's actually incurred from, it's extending the date for the eligible costs incurred back in time from July 1st to March 1st, 2020, which is actually when the CARES Act was passed and expenses could be counted from. So
why did we ever use July 1st? I wonder.
We just did when we were probably last
fiscal year, just started fiscal year probably.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't really matter. We're just making it up from the.
Yeah. So it's carrying those expenses, just to be clear. The coronavirus relief fund reallocation.
We took testimony on that, didn't we?
We did. We heard from the agency on this.
It's just it wasn't, they couldn't do the reallocation because they didn't have the authority.
Right.
So this just gives them the authority to make the reimbursement.
Yeah. And actually, I just want to understand if we needed, Christy, if you would make a note on this one. I don't think this one's mentioned in the effective date section, but this one perhaps needs an effective date.
Upon passage, probably.
Or stretching back, something.
I'll make a note.
We'll double check that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Section 52 in red here, this is where the House is putting aside the $50 million for the pension deal.
Which was very nice. I didn't think that they were going to do that, but it's nice that they reserved it. The question is if in the pension bill, we actually have to appropriate it as opposed to reserving it. So unreserving the 150 and appropriating the 50. I think that's how it's being written. So
that is how it's being written. Yeah.
This would be changed.
Yeah, you would not need to reserve it in 22 because you're actually appropriating it in 22 in the other bill.
So that would come out.
Yeah.
Do we have to renumber then? So now 53 is 52 and so
what we do in those cases is we do delete it unless we're inserting something else in so that we don't
have to keep renumbering.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
The construct. Section 53, this is where the House is setting aside the $85 million they had left on their proposal on the bottom line of the balance sheet for 22, the general fund balance sheet. Part of that was driven by the extra 44 million that came in there, 40 million that came in on the forecast upgrade.
Which is now a little bit less. So we're going to have to adjust that, aren't we?
So this is the one that's this is the 22. 22 wasn't impacted by the error. It was only 23.
Okay. Oh, okay.
So this is not affected by that. This is actually the 22. And so obviously this and what's been proposed by the governor in terms of general fund spending and how your general fund spending aligns with ARPA, all of, this will probably be revisited by the House itself in their own building of the big bill. But they wanted to actually, make a statement about parking the unspent money and to hold it out for state match.
Well, conceivably, when we look at some of the additions that we're making, depending on the funding sources, that we may change that. It may change a little bit. So that will, just knowing that there's an interplay between our final decisions. If we're funding ARPA, then it won't then there won't be a general fund impact, but there may be some areas where we've got small amounts of general fund that we've got to come up with, and it would alter the 85. So that just stays open by
That stays open until.
necessity, so to speak.
This is the intent language on the housing, the emergency housing or the hotel housing, is that it remains available to the end of June this year. And if the FEMA money, which we think is going to end at the end of March, ends then the intent is to use the ERAP funds to stretch us from the end of March to this June date. But this is the use of ERAP funds comes with that question about the tenancy, which we'll see a little later on where they struck that language, that exemption.
Is this the motel?
Yes.
This is the hotel motel emergency housing or non-congregate housing.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure. So this would extend it to June 30th from.
Extend it to June 30th, and if needed, if the FEMA money, which we think will stop at the end of March, does stop, then we will use that pot of ERAP money to do this, to buy the extra quarter of hotel stay. And that's
this is where we have the language around the creation of a tenancy arrangement, or do we do a carve out for
or an
this
exemption for a
program
period of time.
as we do
And then-
for GA? Otherwise,
The question will be what happens on July 1, right?
well, the ERAP is good for what, 18 months?
So you can, the ERAP 2 can pay for up to 18 months. The ERAP came in 2 tranches. They have slightly different, things they can be used for, different percentages. But the first tranche was the $200 million tranche. The second tranche was the $152 million tranche. I think we've had to send back a very small amount, only like a couple $1 million total. But it comes with deadlines of have this much committed by this, or it gets redistributed. So that it's a little, the ERAP piece is that you can do the 12 months in the first round, the first tranche, the other 6 months in the second tranche. There's a bit of management of the way those funds unfold from the federal government that has to happen.
Well, so we have that language around tenancy, and that's later on then.
You'll see it struck out what was proposed by the administration to have the exemption from that go with this.
So this is keeping the program through June. If FEMA ends, we go switch to ERAP, and then the question becomes, what are the conditions that go with ERAP? And looking at the language, and this is what I need to get back to Sean Brown, because the work group was trying to grapple with that, because most motels would not be willing to establish a tenancy or can't because of just zoning and other requirements, I guess permit requirements for for motel lodging. So it gets rather complicated. So the department had requested a carve out, the same as for GA, and that is that the payment to a motel for rooms does not create a tenancy, a landlord tenant relationship. And they want to extend that same carve out to this program as it relates to using these funds for the temporary housing and motels.
Mm-hmm.
And the view of the department is that they are having a hard time anyway. They're having to move people around to find motels, and that if this were, well, first of all, could a motel, even if they wanted to do it, would they violate sort of their zoning or other permits? And then the other is whether they would want to do it at all and get into the eviction requirements and so forth, and the extent to which that would reduce the number of beds or available for people without housing. So,
I have a question on this section, if I could.
yes.
I'm wondering, is there any way I doubt if these are all single parent families that are in these motel units. And we're going to be going into warm weather, good weather. If there's able-bodied people there, are they required to work or go look for work? Or, I mean, are we just going to give them a free ride forever?
Well, I don't think there's a work requirement in ERAP.
But
There
We
would
be-
do get I think a weekly read on who is in the motels by, disability. There are, the last one I saw, 400 and some odd children. So we do get, we'll send you the breakdown of the folks that are in motels weekly.
yeah, it'd be
But-
nice to know if there's able-bodied,
But-
two family members there.
Well, we can
because-
give you a breakdown, but I think for the purposes of FEMA and ERAP, it's not, you can't, I don't think you can, it doesn't come with a work requirement. Food stamps does, but these are emergency benefits. So I think it's probably based on need. But we can double check it, but I don't
Well-
think that the work requirements.
The way everybody's looking for workers of all different stripes and colors, seems as though we could, get something out of this where these people at least have to go. If there's two adults with a couple of children, one of them should be able to go to work. And I don't want to deprive mothers and children, or dads and children, from a warm and comfortable place, but which I don't even think these motel units can be very comfortable, but they, at least in the winter, they're warm.
They are, and they've got hot water, which
Yeah.
a car doesn't have.
And they get food delivered.
Yeah,
They no longer do the delivery of the food. That stopped last year.
That's, well,
They
They-
do get food, Rich?
they did until this, it just ended.
I think we were doing it through Everyone Eats.
Yeah.
Where I think we purchased I just looked at that report. It was close to 2 million meals
Holy
that
smoke.
were prepared by restaurants. And obviously that was, I can't remember, it was over about $20 million was paid to restaurants
Yeah.
to provide to prepare and, the food.
Yeah,
So we'll keep that language in because no one wants to, I think we need to do the ERAP. As I mentioned before, the annual cost for emergency housing, so that which we had at the start of the pandemic because of the public health, we started covering people, single adults, et cetera. And the price tag for that was over $100 million. So obviously the state's ability to provide that benefit is really reliant on, the federal funds related to the emergency. And I guess it states what funds would be used and assurances that housing would be available through 2022. I don't think anybody wants to not provide
We
through
need
the
to
end
do
of the
that.
year.
There's no way
Uh,
we can't.
So we'll just have to look at the language and hopefully get a read from the commissioner's office in terms of the work group's agreement on that. So let's keep going down to transfer of funds.
So this is internal to the legislative branch, and it would allow the funding necessary to come over from the legislature's budget into the joint fiscal budget for the costs. We're going out,
Oh, yes.
the RFP for the childcare study.
For the financing, right?
Yeah, we may be asking to actually fund that in 23. that will depend on the state of where carry forward looks like. If you end up not spending the 1.5 on the State House expansion, that changes the picture of carry forward. So that allows that process to start, the childcare study to start sooner than the date that was in the bill. And here is the State House expansion request. And this is the language that the House agreed on, directing by May 1st to develop and issue an RFP for the design and initial phase of the design, the initial phase of design for the State House expansion.
Well, did we get
The
a
RFP has the
presentation of
date
why
of
we
May
should do?
1st. And
Has there
then,
been any? I'm sorry, Stephanie.
no, go
Go
ahead.
ahead. No, I'm just questioning whether there's been any presentation to this committee on the State House design. I've read about it in Vermont Digger and other places in 7 days, but I haven't seen any,
Well, we have not taken any testimony, as you well know. What I'm going to do is have shoot an email to Senator Benning and ask him to give us a recommendation around this provision to around. It seems like we've got two things going. We've got an RFP and money before there's consensus that there should be an expansion of the State House.
I know that over the summer, there was the State House work group.
Did it call for an
Senator Clarkson was a
expansion?
member of that. I don't know if Senator Benning was a member of that. I can't remember.
Yes, I think so.
And I do believe this group, that at least the legislative members on that group supported the idea of it, expansion.
And had they come to any agreement about what it would, they may have agreed with that, but had they come to any agreement about what it should look like?
Well, I don't think it's about this would be the initial phase of, if you were going to expand the State House, this is the,
Initial phase of design.
And what does it need to, very, very preliminary, infrastructure needs.
Can I just say, Madam Chair, that there's a lot of stuff in this budget adjustment that in normal times we wouldn't have. They would wait till the normal process.
And then take full testimony.
I think this should be part of the capital bill, not part of budget adjustment.
All right. I'll have to communicate with Senator Benning to see if in fact they want to make a recommendation on this, which could include they support it, they are not supportive at this point, or they would prefer that any instructions in any appropriation would be done through the capital bill process.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Why would, the other thing, the governor had, we had that 113 million for capital improvements from ERA. Stephanie, you know what I'm talking about. We didn't appropriate anything. Now the governor in 23 has come up with his list of how it should be spent. It seems like this would be, if it were to be funded, this would could come under that 113 million.
Or it's not in the governor's plan for the 113 million. It's not an easy slam dunk of these are things that are absolutely okay in the language.
That's true. I know broadband is.
You have to show how it passes a couple of tests to be eligible for the capital dollars.
Okay, well,
and those do come with a extended time frame, but still a time. They have to be expended by a certain date.
All right. So I'm going to take those sections and get them into a email to Senator Benning and ask if his committee will make a recommendation to us.
Good.
They'll have to do it soon. But since they have been taking some testimony on this, one would think they could be prepared to give us a recommendation quite quickly.
Yeah.
Okay,
One would think.
all right.
Section 14 was struck by the House because they did not do the $20 million in the bond pay down.
Mhm.
This was simply a statement of intent that the administration wanted to see in that when we paid, if we do an early pay down of debt, then we use the savings from that to defray the cost of future capital expenditures.
Oh, my
And that
goodness, an
ties into their
interesting concept, similar to what I did in
Yeah.
pensions.
Yeah, and it ties in, they have this cash, cash fund idea for going forward, where the general fund would contribute sort of a pay-go amount to the capital, to the array of capital projects, so that we would, over time, issue less debt. And that would be a part of that if you decide to use that construct.
All right, but that's something that,
Yeah, this is where we saw, I'm sorry, moving ahead to section 57, this is the National Guard scholarship program where we see the same down where we saw it in the reversion. Is just less, and we will find that note that you saw in a report.
okay.
This is a language that the House committee included. And Representative Hooper didn't touch on this.
This
Oh,
seems totally inappropriate in a budget adjustment. We're telling hospitals how to use their per diem rates in emergency departments to improve the patient experience.
And what do they mean by improve the patient experience?
And I met with
Give
my
them
local
a-
hospital. I mean, they're being every which way but loose trying to deal with COVID and emergency psychiatric patients and everything else. And they're emerging, and now the legislature is going to tell them to take some of their money and improve the patient experience.
well, what is the per diem? Are they referring to a payment that we're making, Stephanie?
I believe that they are, that there's a,
That's not
we
very
have a
clear
rate,
what,
we have like an acute, like a level 1 rate that we pay to the hospitals when they are having a, I think it stems back almost 10, 12 years to Irene. Post Irene, we established that per diem rate for the treatment in hospitals. And so I think that's what it's referring to, but I can check with Katie McGlynn. I think she might have been the drafter of this.
The hospitals are being forced to handle patients in psychiatric patients in emergency rooms longer basis because we lack placement for them, either at Brattleboro Retreat, which has been closed due to COVID in several occasions, as well as contractual obligations. That's with younger people. And then with adults, the problem is we don't have the long-term placement facility in place. That made a lot of sense. We don't have the long-term placement options available. So in the emergency rooms, which weren't designed to be psychiatric facilities in Rutland, as I remember, and maybe Chittenden, little hospitals like mine at Southwest Vermont are being forced to handle patients. They know it's much too long. They don't want to keep them that long, but they're being forced to. And some of those rooms are not conducive. They don't have any windows or anything, and they have to put extra security on for some of the patients. It's a real mess. And I think this just is kind of, I don't know what all this means, but if I were a hospital administrator, I would certainly be upset with that language.
So
okay, Senator Westman, is that
Can
your
I-
voice?
yes, it is. Can I just ask, where did does anybody know where they got this language? Because I agree with Senator Sears, stepping in and telling them, we know the small hospitals particularly have a bad situation, but how do I know this language is going to make it better?
Well, we'll get a follow-up.
I think we need to understand this more. I would think it probably came from healthcare, but I think what people are expressing here is the hospital's been put in an untenable situation by the volume of individuals that are ending up in their EDs because the mental health system doesn't have the capacity or the ability to respond. So what we're doing is putting more pressure on the default to the healthcare provider who is getting this influx of patients. I heard, for example, at University of Robb Medical Center, one night there were 29 psychiatric patients there, in addition to the COVID. And it seems like I think what people are concerned about is putting more pressure on an already over stressed part of our care system to do something that they are being thrust into by default because of inadequacy in other places in the system. If I understand what people are expressing.
I would just follow up to say with that, for those of us that are in the northern part of the state, when the medical center has shut down their emergency room and won't allow transfers, and there's not enough emergency room space, many of our smaller hospitals have had to shut down their emergency also. So that in combination with all of this, I don't feel comfortable moving ahead without more information.
Well, and it'd be nice to know how much we're paying for these per diems on top of what, they're getting from others. What is the subsidy?
Well, it would be under the probably Medicaid is obviously paying.
Well,
Maybe
So
looking at the language, I would just, I just can't emphasize enough the language. If you read the paragraph, it says, in direct consultation with the Department of Mental Health and with individuals and families with lived experience of mental health emergencies. And you're asking an emergency department that is handling a COVID pandemic right now, that is stretching doctors and nurses thin. And then you have other folks coming in with, normal, well, not normal, but emergencies that drive them to the emergency room. And then you have the psychiatric patients that are being held 11 to 17 days because there's no other placement in the state available for them.
we can get more information, but I think we have a grave concern about adding greater pressure and an assignment of this nature to ask a hospital that's already under pressure to engage in consultation with the Department of Mental Health and families and individuals in terms of to improve patient experience, when some of that might be structural limitations, staffing limitations, whatever. So I think we'll take that, we will set that aside. We're not agreeing with that at all. And what it's doing is basically, it's almost an unfunded mandate. It's basically saying, take the money that you've already getting to reimburse your services and use it to improve patient experience, which means if the reimbursement was needed for the direct care, in essence, the hospitals are being asked to underwrite the cost of these improvements to patient experience.
And the one other thing that I would say is it's worded very oddly so that if it said they shall use the funds to reduce the delays, that would make sense. But what they're saying is it's not to reduce the delays, it's to improve
It's a comfort.
the patient experience while you're having these extraordinarily long delays. And I don't know how you would do that other than to reduce the delay itself.
Which
So-
isn't of their doing because they're
Right.
already overwhelmed by,
Every-
we've been taking testimony from hospitals for, I don't know how many, 3 or 4 years about the concerns and the difficulties they're experiencing because of the shortcomings of our mental health system of care. So I think we've kind of expressed our concerns about this. Not that we want people in the emergency room. We all acknowledge that's not the place where they should be getting this treatment. But it seems like almost the burden should be on the Department of Mental Health to, in consultation, to come up with strategies to reduce or the need of care to be provided in an emergency room setting.
Mhm.
So maybe we should turn it around and say the Department of Mental Health should lead this initiative.
If we're gonna do anything, then it should be up to the Department of Health to seek ways to delay the delays and to, eliminate the delays. I mean, the mental health system is broken. We all know that. And this is just a sign of how broken it is.
All right, I think we've expressed our concerns about
Yeah,
this. And so we can either strike it or we can come back with language that says the Department of Mental Health needs to provide the lead and we'll have to see what's in the 23 budget that specifically will help address this situation where people are ending up in the emergency room and are having to be treated there simply because no other part of the system is available or willing to address their care needs.
and the same thing, by the way, is true of other patients who are awaiting a nursing home for rehabilitation, for example, are being stuck in the hospital itself because there aren't the staff available in the nursing homes to handle the physical therapy, etc. So it's a general problem throughout the system.
I would just say, I think we ought to take it out simply beyond mental health. For the first time in our history, my little hospital at Copley had to close their emergency room to patients coming in. St. Albans has had to do the same thing at Northwest, and the medical center has had to do that. I know those 3 hospitals, Northwest called Copley to take patients, and we refused. If they're that strung out, the mental health patients are only a piece of the bigger picture. And I don't know how this all fits together.
I'll second the motion to take it out.
All right, we're striking it.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you want to continue? You have Nolan scheduled at 3:00. Do you want to go right up to 3:00 or do you want to take a short break?
I've lost track of what time it is.
5
Stephanie,
minutes of 3.
Stephanie, it's Chrissy.
Well,
I have Nolan and Michael at 3:30.
Oh, at 3:30. Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, I thought it was 3.
Thank you.
I thought we were. So we'll continue.
All right, I think section 59, we've got to hold open
Yeah.
because we were
To
waiting for more
discussing the-
information
yeah.
around the positions.
Section 60 is simply an adjustment to where we note the pieces of global commitment that come through certified funds, and it's mostly related to special ed. I may check on updating one of these items, the item in B, to see if that number has changed yet again.
Okay, so we have Nolan coming in at 3:30.
And Michael Grady on the ag premium piece.
Okay,
Correct.
so I'm going to suggest we go to 3:15 and take just a little break,
Okay.
and
And
then
we
come
might get
back
all the way
to
through the end of this pretty much.
Okay, well,
see what we run
let's
into.
keep
Well,
going.
we might get a little stuck on the retention piece. This is a federal spending authority for the information system at child development. Sorry, not family services.
Now
not child
this
development.
is child welfare,
Yeah,
which
this is,
we know from the report that we got back from UVM, our system is antiquated and it doesn't provide data to really help
Yeah.
manage. It's very similar probably to corrections data as well, Dick.
Yeah.
So this is do the first
Yes.
module. Okay, well, and this is federal funding authority. So I think
Yes.
we could close that out.
it's Title 4E.
A lot of testimony on that in the Child Protection Committee.
Yeah.
It's section 62 is a rewriting, a technical rewriting of the section on the justice reinvestment funds. So if we have unexpended money in the out-of-state beds, we direct that to be invested in community-based program. We don't let it leave the budget. We don't let it go to the bottom line anymore.
Mhm.
And so the underlying language is the sort of refinement to what we passed last year that is being proposed by the House Committee. I think it's a recommendation from the House Institutions Committee. And I think it's just being
It's making sure that your community-based programs support justice investment to
yeah.
initiatives.
Yep.
This Injustice Reinvestment Working Group. This is some of the language that was discussed in those
Okay.
meetings.
Uh-huh. All right. It seems like it makes sense. It's very explicit, that any of the savings you're using specifically for that purpose.
Good.
The next one is,
This is the use of ESSER 1 monies. So that's the very first tranche of the ESSER agency dollars.
are we adding funds? Is that why that's in there?
So yes, number 3 is the change. And we don't have.
No, I was just looking back. Why is pandemic underlined and funds underlined?
That's actually blue. I think it's not the underline that is, it's actually, that's Word saying something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
The
not, it's
grammatical.
not like the underline that you see on line 21.
Oh, okay.
It's Word trying to tell you something about your grammar
Oh, all
or your
right.
punctuation.
Okay.
Um,
All right. So,
So what's being added here is the use of $1 million for emergency state level needs. And this is in red, so this was an addition from the House. And so we can find out if that was a recommendation, I think probably from the agency through the ed committees, perhaps. We'll find out. 2.9, I thought we had actually allocated all of the ESSER 1 money, but maybe some of it was freed up.
do you want Philip to follow up on that, or in terms of what are those emergency state level needs?
Emerging state level needs.
I would like to know how much is left of that first tranche.
Okay, well, I think we have that in the office, that somebody's still updating those.
I mean, with regard to what I remember the amounts being, I think that this would make sense, but I've lost track in my mind now how much is there, how much has been expended.
We'll get an updated sheet on that, all 3 tranches of it, because that would be helpful.
Yeah,
Just a reminder of where the other 2 landed
but
as well.
I was thinking that first ESSER money was all gone almost, but
That, I thought so too, and I also thought it had a time frame that it had to be used by, so.
yeah, didn't it? Wasn't it? It wasn't like the ARPA, which had
Yeah,
like
the
a
ESSER
5
3
year.
had a, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So
Well,
maybe just a
well,
refresher.
I'm
on that.
positive one of the new folks in our office has probably taken up the mantle of just that tracking sheet, and we'll see where that's at and get it to you. We'll
Okay.
make a
Thank
note
you.
of that. Oh, actually, we're getting the explanation on the next page. I'm sorry. They're moving the $1 million. No, this is another $1 million.
Mhm.
So they're moving the emergency state level needs into ESSER 1 because of a deadline, and they're reassigning this to learning management assistant, including remote learning supports and materials. So something must have changed on the deadline or the capacity in ESSER 1, and that's why you saw the $1 million move up out of ESSER 3 into ESSER 1.
Okay.
Okay, and they took up the emergency state level needs and put that in ESSER
in the
1.
earlier tranche of money, and then reassigned this $1 million to the learning management.
Okay,
I see they're adding in the tech centers now to the HVAC.
Yes.
That's great.
Yeah, that's good.
That's
But, Stephanie,
Yep.
I see that they're broadening the usage, but do they still have enough money in that program? I remember we added last budget, we added a chunk. But if they're going to add the regional tech centers, I'm just wondering if they have, although the House must have taken testimony on that, I would think.
Well, I'll follow up on that one as well. I believe that there was a little bit of some delays in terms of the second round of HVAC funding. It didn't go out as quickly.
yeah, that was a delay. But
And then there's work they can't do when schools are in session.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. So
we'll
they-
find out what the status is of that in terms of, does it dilute?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we always have the big bill coming after this.
Yeah.
If it's
And I
needed
also
down
think some of the career technical center projects were in the sort of accounting already, a little bit. So we'll close the loop on that.
so maybe it's to authorize what we've been doing.
Well, I know that there was a decision at AOE midsummer that they didn't think they could go forward with the tech center projects without this type of clear language, and
I
it
see.
created some angst.
Well, and given what
wait.
happened at Burlington High School, where the tech center was ground zero for the PCBs, you really want to make sure the HVAC system is fully functioning in those
Yeah.
in those
Sen-
centers.
Okay, I think we certainly want that, and the question is
Yeah.
how much money is still
Okay.
available. But
Yeah.
I think in terms of making it clear that career tech centers are, that we want kids to be protected there as well. We
Yeah.
would close that out.
And I can't remember, I believe we might have done the second round of this, not in CRF, but in ARPA dollars. So it does have a longer lead time.
Yeah, okay.
Section 66, this is simply extending the funding. This was the nurse and primary care scholarship funding that we had done through, we put money aside several years ago with the tobacco money, and it took a while to get it deployed, and we deployed part of it through a bill and more of it last year. And this simply allows the funding to remain to be available to VSAC until expended, as opposed to, if it's not fully subscribed by the end of this year, it would be available to be swept up as a
I
reversion.
knew we used tobacco money for the mental health, and we did for that child welfare initiative. This is nursing. Did we use some of that?
2 years ago, we did the bill that sort of reallocated, and then in the budget itself last year, when we built the budget, we had the extent. These are actually not the tobacco dollars. These are the base dollars that we had built into the budget last year.
Okay. All right.
The one-time dollars to fund this that we built in last year.
Jane, is this for nursing?
Yeah.
Yesterday we had, I was in on a meeting, and we were talking about how we can't put out more nurses because we don't have nursing faculty members. I'm wondering, I don't know if this is the right place or time, but I was wondering afterwards last night about that. Why, there's some nurses that get to be 50, 60 years old that don't want to do the swing shifts and all that. But if we had some kind of an incentive for them to go back to school and maybe pay their tuition fees.
Well, you're talking about a strategy of how to expand the classes, which we've talked about. Part of it is also the requirements in place in terms of what credentials a faculty member has to have. We had an earlier discussion on that. So we have two constraints on growing our programs. One of the clinical placements, and the second is what credentials are the state's currently requiring for faculty members. And the big thing with a lot of people, and many of our hospitals actually have masters, even PhD level, but they don't want to leave the hospital to teach because the wages are so much lower. So hospitals now are interested and more willing to think about providing faculty. It's all part of a package of how we can expand our nursing programs. And right now, loans and scholarships, are sort of the old way of thinking. But until we deal with increasing the supply, all we're doing is throwing money into an inadequate pool and hoping that we can, hire, that it would make the difference in hiring someone. So I don't know if nursing, were you with a hospital or were you home health?
No, we were just talking with the president of Linden, or the interim president at Linden College, and they've set a program up there that works from there through internet, through BTC.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with that. In fact, Senator Leahy, they did a last grant, and that was done actually. That was done as a result. I had a meeting where I called the hospital, I called the Linden folks and the northern counties and said, look at this nursing report. Look at the thousands of nurses that we're going to need. We are going to have to expand programs. And how do we deal with those fundamental issues? And how do we expand the program at Linden, which is remote learning? And so part of what they're doing now is a result of that initiative with VTC to expand nursing. So I don't know what their experience, they haven't started it because they had to get some more, and that's what the Leahy grant did, was get them the lab equipment necessary to support the program.
Yeah, and they said pay is one issue, but training faculty nurses to become faculty members to be able to teach nursing was a big item as well. But we can talk about that. Doesn't have to be discussed today, but sometime You
Well,
know,
it does, no, it can't be discussed today, but it's been a topic of a lot of discussion.
Yeah.
In terms of how you expand the clinical placements, because some people say it's not the educational programs that are the, point of constriction. It's you can't find enough placements for them to meet their clinical requirement. So
I would just say, there's a member of the Copley board that is that runs a nursing program in the SUNY system, and I think it's at SUNY Plattsburgh, or the SUNY Potsdam, and she's losing teaching faculty because they can make $50,000 more a year to be a traveling nurse. So we don't have enough people teaching, and the system is imploding.
so
So
they
it's
really
a topic
need,
of grave concern. I don't know what the meeting was last night, Bobby. Was it in Newport?
no, it was with the Northeast Collaborative yesterday afternoon, I think it was. You know, they brought all the people together, and
Yeah, I know. I think
the interim president was on, and we got into the nursing part, and because we were talking about students going on to college, and now they could use more students. And so we brought up nursing, and he said, well, we've established that program, remotely with VTC, but we haven't got enough instructors to do more.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Bobby. And the problem is he's a new president, and he probably has no background in terms of the amount of discussion and the meetings that have gone on that have got him to this point. So, the only thing I can tell you is this is a topic that we've had underway for the last few years, and to try to get Linden program expanded. The grant that just was received, I think, takes care of that, but it doesn't mean all the problems have been solved. But without any context or historical background, it appears like this is an issue that nobody has thought of. And the only thing I can say is Rich and I have been banging this drum for how many years since that nursing report came out.
That's right.
Well, you've worn the sticks all out on your drumsticks.
Well, I think so, but then new people come in, or other people, or you got a new director of the collaborative and has no historical background in terms of what has gone on in the efforts. So it's not, the identification of the need is well documented.
Well established, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just a matter of how we can start beginning to make progress to expand the supply,
Yeah.
which is.
It was interesting talking with him because, last year I worked with him down there on setting up a ski management repair type system in the college to train young men and women to, in all aspects of the ski industry. And by golly, they've got that up and started. He said it's coming along slow, but they're gonna be able to advertise out of state for students to come in and be trained to work in that industry. So that, it was good.
All the states are looking for the same kind of thing. The governor of New York mentioned it. Stephen Colbert even mentioned it on late night TV last night. So it's like all over the place.
Yeah,
About
nursing.
what, Alice?
Yeah.
About
What?
nursing.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, nursing is rough.
Well, that's why we wanted to create a career ladder. And that's why we funded that project for nursing that was a partnership between nursing homes and BTC in this year's budget, so that we can take staff who are at maybe at a more at the LNA level, but want to increase their skills. So that's another initiative. And I suspect that our big problem is some of this stuff people either don't know about. And so if you don't know about it, you assume nothing is happening, or we aren't good about all the different pieces because it's very hard to keep straight. But I think that partnership that we funded, wasn't it about 42 nurses would be?
Yeah, 40, 42.
Yeah. And that was with the nursing home VTC partnership.
But it's a pipeline, and, you know, it takes a while to move
Oh,
through
yeah.
the pipeline, and people want immediate change.
Yeah, that's not gonna happen.
In the meantime, a lot of nurses are going into the traveling nurses, so
And you
Move
can't blame them.
fast you can get in.
It's a terrible problem.
Yeah,
So I'm just looking at the time,
let's take a break.
and I'm thinking of 3:16, and I think maybe this is a good place.
We'll come back and start in 67 at some point in the next day or two.
Yeah, and so at 3:30, we will go to Nolan
And Michael Grady.
and Michael Grady to go into the ag proposal.
Yeah. And
Okay.
Chrissy, you got that note I sent you in regards to the Department of Ed not
Yep, I'm
needing any money?
Just as a
I'm going to
warning,
go offline. Do you want to go off live?
Yes,
right
we
now?
should go
Okay.
offline, and we will